guys, and welcome back to ModCons. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh my God, we're on the road again. What a beautiful setup we've got here today. I love it.
Very stately.
And also we've got an extra person joining us.
This guy.
James, who's James? What's he doing here?
What is he doing here? So today we are here with James Wright. He is a farmer. He is my fellow member of the Conservative Rural Forum board. He's actually director of policy, so he's very official, much more official than I am. And he is also a candidate in the general election 2024. So he is a very notable fellow that we have with us today. So we're going to be talking to James all about farming, all about Labour's assault on farmers, and much more.
It's all go. I mean, I bet you've got a lot to say, James.
I don't need to. You do seem to have a lot to say. So,
well, first of all, welcome. I mean, is there anything you want to sort of just share before we start harassing you with our questions?
Well, look, I am a beef and sheep farmer in a beautiful place called Exmoor. I farm on the Devon-Somerset border. I'm a first generation farmer, so I bought 2 pigs with my student loan 10 years ago. I'm the first farmer in my family for 100 years. And I'm very lucky enough to farm with my wife, and we have 2 children and another one on the way. So I am a family farmer.
Amazing.
I didn't realise you farmed with your wife, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's Isabel as much as a farmer as I am.
I love that.
Family business, love that.
So that was actually my first question.
Oh, great.
So yeah, you beat me there, Jay. So I said, so you have a really interesting story. You bought your first pigs with your student loan.
Oh dear.
No, you didn't. So what did actually make you want to become a first generation farmer?
So my father was a businessman. He lived all over the world and he traveled a lot. And when I was growing up, I always missed my dad. And I knew that being a farmer meant you were always at home. So in my last year of university, they asked me to write a business plan. And I thought, you know what, instead of writing this business plan, why don't I just go out and start that business? So I started a hog roast company. We used to do hog roasts for sort of weddings and things like that.
So cool.
And then I convinced NatWest to lend me some money. I told them I had a kitchen I wanted to do up, and they gave me an unsecured loan, and I bought some sheep. And yeah, that was 10 years ago, and it's been a crazy journey ever since. So.
That's so entrepreneurial. I love that. Yeah.
Oh, we lost a fortune. So I mean, it's not a good entrepreneurial story. We now own our own farm. So this April, we were tenant farmers for 8 years, my wife and I, and we've now bought our own farm.
Amazing.
I work full time as well, and that's what's helped by the farm. Farming has not bought the farm, unfortunately.
How's the kitchen looking?
Yeah. So we had our kitchen ripped out, and we're just getting it all back in just in time for Christmas. But yeah, it's been a journey.
Amazing.
So you are the founding employee of Breeder, the Breeder app. Tell us a little bit about that and what it does and what inspired you to kind of get involved.
Yeah. So I mean, the easy way to explain it is Auto Trader for livestock. So we help farmers track data. Track data about their animals, just like an MOT or a service history, you have your car. We get farmers to record weights, medicines about their animals. And then when they sell their animal, we then help transfer the data with it. And because we can see you're a good farmer and the animals you're buying are good, we'll then lend you money to be able to buy them. And then we speed up that cycle. So we basically run a digital backed livestock bank, which is sort of enables supply chains. So the company started 7 years ago. Brilliant entrepreneur called Ian Wheel came over from Australia, started it, and we've now got teams in America, Australia. It's all developed in the UK, built in the UK, and then used around the world. It's been a brilliant success, and it's all down to the people who helped us build the app, so software developers, but also the farmers who use the app as well. We've got a great community.
That's amazing. I love it when a plan comes together. Actually, talking about sort of, I was going to ask you a bit about AI and what that means for the future of farming. But I guess, well, that's one example of it working in favor of farms. And obviously we have, weather apps and stuff like that, which also help. But are there any other things in the pipeline or things that, think could really help farming or are actually future-proofing what's going on in farming industry?
Well, look, farming is primed for disruptions. We talk about industries that are ready to be disrupted, and that is farming. The last great agricultural revolution was the Industrial Revolution, when we moved from being subsistence farmers, where you'd have to farm to feed your family, you'd have to farm as well, to instead having me, who can farm farm and feed hundreds of people. And we now need to go through that next bit. 40% of farmers work for under minimum wage. We only produce 70% of the food that we eat in the UK. We need to make farmers more efficient. We need to get them to produce more food. And there is a lot of inefficiency out there. And that inefficiency generally comes from not having the money to be able to invest in your business or not knowing how to make the right decisions. There is a new generation of farmers coming through, and those are the ones that will be adopting technology more rapidly. They'll be the ones making the decisions. Farms are going to get larger. They're just going to have to be, because in order to support a family, they need to. But it's not all doom and gloom. Beef, lamb, highest prices they've ever been. Okay, yeah, we have had the worst harvest in like 100 years, not quite, but the worst harvest in like 20 years this summer because of climate change.
Right.
But there is no doubt that we are in an exciting time for farming until Labour came along.
To the next
Labour came along and decided to pull the rug out from farmers.
That's the thing.
And that's the tragedy.
Well, it's so interesting you said that, because those statistics, they roll off your tongue, but they're quite shocking. And even though you think that 70% isn't a lot of food that farmers produce, it's a lot. And considering I'm going to remember these forever, 40% of farmers are earning under the minimum wage. That is so terrible.
That is terrible.
And to think that now the Labour Party think that this is an acceptable and a good time to squeeze farmers even more is just outrageous.
It is.
A lot of the time I hear like pushback on this agricultural property relief, IHT, that, there's a £3 million kind of buffer and it's all fine and you guys are overegging it. Could you please explain to all of our amazing listeners why that's not the case?
Yeah, so I mean, the fact is, this is a tax that every year has been suggested by the Treasury. Every year, Conservative ministers were presented with this tax as an option, and every year they said no, because we know and we understand that the numbers that you are looking at, Treasury official, are wrong. Labour were presented with the same, and because they're all from London, they did not realise that actually what they were being presented was wrong. It's not a loophole. It's not that farmers don't want to pay tax. It's that they cannot afford to pay it. In my lifetime, we rent and we own part of our farm. So if you take the total value, the bit that we don't own included, it will not make enough profit in my lifetime to be able to pay the inheritance tax bill. It's that simple. And 40% of farmers earn under the minimum wage because food is cheaply and readily available so that everyone can afford to eat. And that is a wonderful thing about our society, is that there is not, some people do are skipping meals, but the vast majority, by global standards, is very low food insecurity. But this tax is an absolute disaster. And, Treasury say it's going to affect 500 farms, but you listen to the Countryside Landowners Association, the NFU, whoever, it's very clear they've got their numbers wrong. They look at a very neat picture of a couple owning a farm, but reality is farm ownership is very, very complicated. It's generally owned by multiple people. There's loads of stuff that goes into it, and they all die at different times, And even if it is owned by two people, I'm 32. Let's say in 5 years' time, I get hit by a tractor and die. My wife is going to have to find the money to be able to pay the bill, in the prime of our lives. So it's not just a farm tax, it's a tragedy tax. This will become a family tragedy tax, and it's just completely immoral.
On that kind of sort of, where can the government get money from? If it's not actually through the sort of inheritance tax, what about maybe after sales, capital gains? Are there any other options within the sector that would actually sort of give them a bit of money for whatever reason they need? That would be sort of acceptable, if you like, or doable for you as farmers.
So it generates 520 million a year. So it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money. I mean, when they came in July, gave £9 billion worth of pay rises to their union mates. Like 520 million, it's not a huge amount. If they were adamant that they wanted to carry on with the family farm tax, what they should do is they should make it like capital gains tax. So if you're a brewery and you sell an asset and it's increased in value, you can pay capital gains tax on it, or you can roll it over and buy a new asset, maybe a more efficient boiler or whatever, and then you don't pay capital gains tax on it. You could do the same with farms. So when someone dies, the inheritance tax liability is generated, but as long as that farm is not sold and kept in the family, you then don't pay the tax. That would be a really simple way of making it fair, in inverted commas, whilst at the same time protecting family farms. But this isn't about fairness.
No.
This is about a Labour war on the countryside that they don't understand. And that's the real sad thing, is if they'd spoken to anybody about this tax, they would understand that it just does not work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's really, it's shocking actually. Like we already know it's shocking, but hearing it firsthand and figures, it really makes it just drums it home. So I hope you're all listening and fighting for the cause. But also sort of what steps can you take as a farmer to protect and sort of help, you not having to pay these extra costs in the future? What can you do now that that maybe other
the first thing you can do is vote Conservative.
There we go.
We had it in the manifesto. The Conservative Party had protection for agricultural property leave in the manifesto. We're the only party to do that. So the first is vote Conservative.
Okay.
The second is there's not a general election coming for a couple of years, so you can't vote now. Join a protest. There are protests happening tomorrow, up and down the country. Write to your MP. The fact is that there are 100 new rural Labour MPs on very small majorities who right now will be very worried. So write to them, make sure you book an appointment to go and see them. Be polite. But whether or not you're a farmer or not, make sure that you are very clearly saying to them that there are better options than destroying family farms. And the third thing is vote Conservative, because we are the only party, that put APR protection in our manifesto, and we're the only party who can form a government at the next election. We're the only party who've got the numbers to do it. So if you want to say family farms, Kemi Badenoch's been very clear. We will reverse the family farm tax at the first opportunity.
Absolutely. I don't think Farage has said that actually. I found that reform, we obviously, Laura and I went to the protest, as did you, James. And
very civilized,
it was very civilized. But one of the things that we saw there were a lot of reform MPs. They were kind of flooding the place, and they were kind of
5 of them.
But they were there, and they're kind of making this their cause because they know it's popular with their audiences. They know it's popular with reformers. They know it's popular with GB News viewers. And so they're kind of riding this bandwagon. But I don't feel like this is a genuine policy that comes from who they are. I've never heard them talk about farmers until this tax. I've never seen them do anything rural before this tax. So I just find it very convenient. My only problem with that is, how do we, as a Conservative movement, differentiate ourselves from reform?
So in the manifesto, in the Reform Manifesto, they had a couple of promises around farming, one of which was to return to direct payments. So under the EU, we gave farmers for just money for just owning land, for renting land. And that's one of Labour's commitments. So they wanted to return to an old EU-style policy, which meant that the largest landowners got the most money, instead of what the new Conservative scheme, Sustainable Farming Incentive, which I'm in, and I'm receiving 3 times the amount that I would have received under basic payment. And I'm actually delivering a lot of good for the public. I've got herbal lays, which are good for my cattle. I'm still producing food. And the public are getting lots of support for pollinators, and the farmers getting paid more. But no, they wanted the old EU-style rules. Now, are farmers on the side of farmers? Is reform on the side of farmers? I mean, look at the evidence. Nigel Farage, one of the key sort of people championing an American trade deal, which would mean chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef that we rightly so cannot produce here, that would undercut British farmers, would fill our shelves. So I think they can say one thing in public, but the moment you actually start to look under the hood and scrutinise that detail, actually, it's not so good. But there are only five of them, so you would be forgiven for not looking in the detail.
But I guess they got to start somewhere, right? And they do have to be seen to be doing supporting you. That is quite scary. We don't want chlorinated chicken.
No, we do not.
Beefed up.
I'm glad you uncovered that, James. Thank you for sharing with our listeners.
We wouldn't think about that, but it's true, because he's cozying up with Trump, obviously, and that's the next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And look, for those that want to eat hormone treated beef, but my cows are all hormone free and eat great British grass.
I've got enough hormones. I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. But so what is actually your most challenging role as a farmer, just in general? Obviously competing, I guess, with international mass farmers might be a thing, although we want real homegrown healthy stock. We don't want these injected chemicals.
Competition is good, right? So, you know, I believe in the free market, private enterprise. Competition is good, but when there's a level playing field, you cannot import, or you should not be able to import food to the UK that is illegal to produce here. That should be a hard and fast rule. But the problem is, with most trade deals that you sign, in order to get access for our service sector, for our cars or whatever we're producing here, generally we have to allow these countries to import their food produce at their standards. So, you know, I can understand that, you know, but also at the same time, there's an opportunity for us to export beef out there, lamb out there. American lamb is, I'm very sorry to say, it's not great. It's not a great quality product. But we export. You know, Conservative government signed a trade deal to send British lamb out to America. That's a great opportunity. And when we look at trade deals, we should look at them like that way. How does this complement us? But unfortunately, particularly with America, the agri-food lobby is a very powerful lobby, and I just say, because lots of my customers are Americans, and you know, so there is nothing wrong with American beef. Absolutely nothing wrong with American beef. But in Britain, we can't produce it to the same standards. So what that will mean is that small family farmers like me will go out of business because we cannot afford to compete. So that's the problem, rather than being a problem with the produce.
And do you think brand, like the British brand abroad in terms of meat, is
it's really powerful. It's really powerful. We get inquiries all the time from the Middle East, from, you know, far Asia, wanting to fly that Union Jack. It's such a powerful brand. We forget, I think, because we're so you know, because of everything we've been through over the last couple of years, Great Britain is seen as great. We need to remember that. We need to embrace that brand. But at the same time, we need the ambition and to be there. I mean, I was really disappointed when we went to go and export to one country, and I contacted the embassy and I asked, you know, I'm coming to the country, could you organise a couple of meetings? You know, because I thought that's what the embassy did. I know they just said, no, we can't do that. But, you know, so then you're calling up these companies and just asking, can I meet with you? But could you imagine if they got a letter from the ambassador saying, hey, we've got this great British business, they're coming to meet you. Would you mind coming to the embassy? You know, that is what our embassies should be there for. That is what the Americans do. It's really well. It's what the Australians do really well. They have the agri-food attaches. You know, we need to be really ambitious when it comes to our global footprint, and it's one of the things that we need to stand on a policy platform for.
Talking of embassies, I was literally at the German embassy just the other day, and the flags they were flying for their produce and their goods was incredible. They're incredibly proud of all the things they produce, and it was literally a show for us, all the visitors, to see what is good. So that would be absolutely perfect. I don't understand why that's not
we should be
standard.
doing more of that. For sure.
100%. Why those British flags?
Why that flag? So where do you stand, James? Okay, so this is controversial. I remember when I first joined the Conservative Rural Forum, when I first discovered the Conservative Rural Forum, I wandered into a conference room. There was a party going on, and I was speaking to the then chair, and he was saying, you know, I was asking him, it was at the Zach Goldsmith time, and I was asking his thoughts on things like rewilding and where he stood, and he didn't have a very good response. It didn't have a very good reaction to that. But he did say that, you know, farmers know how to farm. They don't need to be told how to farm. But then you have other farmers, like the guys that do wild farmed, who are very much of the kind of school of thought that you should be mixing the things you're producing. So, you know, mixing like bluebells with wheat and things like that, just to make the soil better. So where do you stand on things like regenerative farming? Where do you stand on rewilding, the kind of more modern approaches to farming?
So there's a lot there.
Sorry, that's a very long question today.
So let's unpack rewilding. I used to be a councillor and cabinet member near NEP. Everyone that doesn't know NEP, it's the most amazing sort of area where they used to farm, and then literally just one day the combines left the field and they've just let it go, and it's returning to scrub. They've got stalks there which they've introduced, but they've built this incredible ecosystem. That is brilliant. It is not a model for the whole country. The way that business makes money is through tourism, through research. Like, you can't, there is a market cap at that. What I want to see, and what I think the majority of farmers would be happy with, and it would protect our food security, is hubs like NEP all over the country, where you would take where landowners want to, they can rewild their farm with the support of NGOs, with maybe a little bit of government money, but like more about enabling than other money rather than using government money. But they'd be very targeted, and then connecting up those habitats through nature corridors. So, by increasing the size of our hedgerows, by, restoring waterways, because that's how animals move around the countryside. And what you would then have is a network of limited but very biodiverse rewilding hubs connected up by nature-rich farmland. Nice. That is the way to do it, not by planting monocultures of trees like Brewdog have done, and not by, getting loads of farmers to suboptimally produce food across whole farms. It's about hardcore rewilding where people want to, linking up those communities. Regenerative farming is great, but it's not going to feed the planet. There is a reason why the Haber-Bosch process, which is the process that we used during the First World War to create explosives, those factories then became the nitrogen fertilizer plants. That is what has made food cheaply and readily available for all. Like, nitrogen is a vital part of the agricultural process. You cannot farm regeneratively and use that level of fertilizer. You cannot feed the world and not use fertilizer. So regenerative farming is great for the middle class, but for everyone else, there is food produced to a high level of sustainability. But at the same time, if there's money to be made, farmers should be able to do it, and that's why wild farming is brilliant, because for those that can, they will.
What do you think? Just I always bang on about this, and she tells me off. But those like super farms in Holland, for example, Holland, Israel, whatever. They have these like super greenhouses that are, I guess they're modern technology. They're always at the right temperature, always have the right filter and the right. What about those not instead of, but as well as, would it work? Because then we have like we can be self-sufficient as a country, and we can also sell more, even to other territories. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's a bit controversial, because
I know it's not controversial at all. It's business though, and the fact is that in the UK that at the moment doesn't stack up. It's not to say it won't in the future. I mean, Beeswax Dyson, which is James Dyson's farming company, they've just built an enormous brand new greenhouse in Lincolnshire or Suffolk. It's growing strawberries, and you can go into supermarkets and buy strawberries grown from there. There is an industry and a critical mass that has grown up around Holland. I mean, Israel, vertical farming is very popular. It is very resource intensive. It requires a lot of energy input in terms of both like keeping them warm, but also moving things around the supply chain. I mean, if that's going to happen, it's going to happen because there is a driver, and the driver might be some sort of food insecurity in the UK, that sort of thing. I mean, it's probably not going to grow up organically over time.
Okay.
But it's not controversial. I mean, food is food.
Food is food. There you go. You had it here first.
But I'm just wondering, do farmers, are they concerned that might sort of obliterate certain parts of their farming?
I don't think so. I mean, we import at the moment. The things that we import are those things. They're the tomatoes, they're the fruits. That's the sort of stuff that we're currently not very good at being self-sufficient in. And then we do import things like bread wheat, and then we export feed wheat. I mean, the fact is, wheat is not wheat, right? So there are different levels, and this is what people don't understand. The food supply chain system is incredibly complex and incredibly vulnerable. We saw during COVID how literally just an increase of demand in specific stores meant there were shortages. It wouldn't take much for that to happen again. So it is really important that we do produce as much food here as we can.
And we always talk a lot about shopping seasonally, eating seasonally. And do you think, I think when I go to the supermarkets, I get very bored of what's on offer. I want to see more seasonal produce and give things to give me ideas for like dinners and lunches or whatever. Do you think it's the supermarkets driving this, or do you think it's just lazy consumers that are not open to eating seasonally?
I mean, so all the research says is that the driver in why someone picks a specific supermarket is because of price. That is the number one driver for everything. So the reason why the supermarkets run petrol pump competitions is to get people near the store so they then fill up their tank and then go into the shop.
Yeah.
It's price, 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 price. There's a brilliant bit of research done by Kantar, which is a big market research company, and they asked people into the shop, why do you choose the things that you do? And everyone says, well, I look at whether or not it's from Britain. And then they interviewed the same people. They interviewed the same people out on the way out and looked at their baskets, and they shopped entirely on price. So people say one thing but then do another. So it's price. The reason why the supermarkets have been brilliant is because they have sort of streamlined, integrated the supply chain, driven the price down. But now we are at the stage where something has to give, and at the moment, what is giving has been the planet. So there has been either water pollution or environmental pollution off the back of the food supply chain. And now that is stopping, which is great. But it means then, well, what is going to have to give? Is it the farmer's margin? Is it the supermarket's margin? Or is the consumer going to have to pay more? And over the next 5 years, this is all going to have to play out. We're seeing it at the moment with Bovar, which is a additive that's been added to milk, added to cows to suppress the amount of methane they are producing. Because supermarkets need to be able to hit their emissions targets. Now, the consumer so far has reacted in a way to that. It'd be very interesting to see how the supermarkets then react to that, because obviously the reputation around food security is literally is tantamount to godliness. One of the brilliant things about the UK, and actually where the regulatory state has worked really well, is that food security in the UK is brilliant. You can go to any supermarket and you can pick up any good, and you're not going to get food poisoning from that. Yeah, we take that for granted.
We do.
So one other thing. So 1 in 20 Brits experience food poisoning. 1 in 20 Americans experience food poisoning every year. In the UK, it's 1 in 120.
Wow.
So I'm not saying our food is,
superior, but
is 6 times safer than American food. But there is no doubt that our food regulatory system has meant that bad actors are not in the system, which means that food is therefore safer to eat.
So all those people calling in sick because they got food poisoning, it's a hoax.
Or they're eating not British.
Or they're eating American. No, but you mentioned the margins, and something's got to give, whether food prices go up, farmers' margins go down, or supermarkets' margins go down. I feel like obviously farmers' margins can't get any smaller, so that's just put that aside. During COVID, it's not talked about that much, but the supermarkets did very, very, very well.
Yes.
We all queued outside of supermarkets. The shelves were empty the entire time. Yeah. They're doing okay. Why is there no pressure being put on supermarkets to address the fact that farmers are being squeezed and consumers are being squeezed, and they're kind of sitting pretty?
Because I don't think they are.
Interesting.
So
okay.
So if you look at actual profit margins, they are not making a lot of money. So if I don't have the numbers completely offhand, but let's say the profit margin is percent. Yeah. And they are multi-billion pound businesses, and they are making hundreds of millions of pounds of profit.
Yeah.
So yes, they are profitable, but there isn't actually a lot of slack in the food supply chain. I think the big problem is that since 2008, we have not really seen real-term wage growth, which means there is not enough money flowing around the system. Housing has gone up so much. There's rents as well. So there is more money being sucked out of the system. And actually, we shouldn't blame the farmer, the consumer, or the supermarket. What we should blame here is government.
Blame party.
For stifling innovation.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is foster a culture that rewards and encourages entrepreneurs to invest, to create jobs and improve productivity. Yeah. That is the only way that we will generate the tax to pay for the services, to pay for the defence, to pay for the infrastructure we all want. And then from that, it will also then increase competition for employees, which will drive up wages, so people have more money. And an economy is just the circular movement of money around a system. The faster you can make it move around, the better people will feel better off. That is how you solve the food crisis.
Okay. So what do?
Vote Conservative.
Vote Conservative.
Yeah.
So that's one of my questions was actually what do you think modern conservatism is? And you've kind of just answered it, but is there anything you'd maybe add or caveat to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Conservative Party member since I was 16 years old, over half my life now, and for the majority of that, the Conservative Party has represented what I think are the values that we need to embody, which is strong borders, the role of family, private enterprise, and most importantly of all, personal freedom.
Yeah.
And when we look at the future of conservatism, we need to make sure that those 5 things are at the heart of everything that we do, because without that, there is no future of this country. The role of private enterprise in it's private enterprise which creates jobs. It's not government that creates jobs, and that's what the Labour Party don't understand, which is why their £25 billion jobs tax is so awful, because businesses like mine are now having to spend tens of thousands of pounds more a year for absolutely no increase in productivity.
Right, yeah.
That's people we won't be employing. That is people who won't be getting pay rises. That's across the entire industry, across the entire country, and they just don't realise what they've done.
Yeah. My goodness.
Well, James.
My goodness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I always call him the fount of all knowledge.
He is.
It could all be bollocks.
No, it's not. It's really not. It sounds good to us.
It sounds good to us.
And hopefully it will sound great to our viewers as well. James, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an insight.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll see you at some of the rallies, the farmers' protests. So yes, thank you so much, Jamie, James, and LB. It's been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget, tune in every Monday midday. ModCons, it's been a pleasure. Bye.
Bye now.